Hello there, folks, and welcome back to the Look Back. And it's back. We're looking back 3 weeks. It's been a while. Erling Haaland scored 3 times since we last met, which doesn't seem like that many. And it realizes, really, I've not been away that long. But lots of Premier League action has happened, and I've been busy. FM came out, Football Manager, the new Football Manager. I've been to their studios and parenting, and they're my excuses. We should be back next Monday, though, to do this again weekly, just before the World Cup starts, and we'll be covering all things England as we get towards that, as well as a Football Manager series where I take over the national team and hopefully produce glory. Right? Hopefully. So rather than go over every single game we've seen for the last 504 hours in the last 3 weeks, let's focus on some of the big talking points that we've seen over the Premier League action in weeks gone by. And there's no better place to start, I don't think, than at Aston Villa, where they've got themselves a new manager. Well, they've got rid of the old one. And the Gerrard era is then over, and from week one, you might argue, I kind of saw this coming. The lack of identity that Aston Villa completely failed to have, to me, is the big reason why it simply hasn't worked. I think there are loads of other sort of intangible things that you might be able to look at that aren't obvious straight away. On the pitch, it was just 11 players put out to do a job, and it never necessarily felt like all of those players were trying to do the same job. There was constant confusion about what his best 11 was. I don't think he ever found it, and I think Villa fans began getting frustrated with not only that, but just a lack of chance creation, a lack of ideas. The tactical nous that Aston Villa had seemingly exists now at QPR, and that is one of their biggest issues. And I think a new manager came in at the weekend and just told them to let loose a little bit, be free. And Gerrard seemingly had this sort of stiff upper lip attitude a little bit of bygone years, you might say. And that was his big catalyst of this is how we're going to get things done, by working together and working hard. And I think there was at times where Villa players needed a bit of an arm around the shoulder, and he was kind of done with them. I look at his relationship with Leon Bailey mostly and just think that just never seemed like a connection or a bond that looked natural or real or felt like they got on. Even like that was a big issue. Like the situation with Mings early in the season might not have been indicative of what was to come, but it sort of set the stall out a little bit of this is me and that's you, and we're not the same. And I think the best teams these days tend to act as one and as a unit, and it was sort of Aston Villa on one side and Steven Gerrard on the other, and they were just clashing. So the break seemed right for me. Like, it had to happen sooner rather than later. I think Gerrard lost patience with the players, but I think more importantly, the fans and the players had lost patience with Steven Gerrard, and ultimately that sees him leave. It's the right choice. They need to discover their identity, because it's quite clear to me, based on my pre-season predictions, they've got the squad there to do it. They just now need the right man in charge. And who that is? Well, is there a favourite? The favourite for the job right now is Unai Emery. So, really? There's a few others in there, but Emery's the favourite as of time of recording? Okay, maybe. Meanwhile, Michael Beale at QPR turned down a job in the Premier League. So, I wonder, would he go to Villa? He's not a favourite. Well, he's 16-1. All right, so from the depressing news of Aston Villa, let's go to Arsenal, where we talked about them a lot in other lookbacks of looking like a team that could contend. And I don't think that anymore. I don't think Arsenal could contend. I think they are contending. And Mikel Arteta, again, I think he's the man that deserves most of the praise for the big decisions he made on not only bringing Jesus in and identifying that was the one thing they needed, that striker to pivot around and play off, basically, but also have the ability to take players on and create problems on his own. That's worked really well. What he's done with bringing Saliba back in and making him a pivotal part of Arsenal's defence too deserves a lot of credit. Trusting Ben White at right back, playing Tomiyasu at left back when he needs to, and making it feel, again, natural. Like, we talk about the bond and the connection that didn't exist at Villa. It's the one thing at Arsenal right now that gives them great hope of things happening. The fan base are on board. Like, I can hear them singing during games. They are so invested and so on board with what Arteta's doing. Obviously, the big question mark of if this starts to go awry, how much criticism does he end up with? And Arsenal will be considered bottlers if it goes badly from here, when the reality is they're arguably right now overperforming to some degree, but they don't even look like they are. They look like this is the Arsenal that is supposed to exist, and for that they deserve a lot of credit. Granit Xhaka has had his best season in an Arsenal shirt in this early stage of the season, and again, he deserves a lot of credit for that. But these boys are contenders now. They are not pretenders. They are not battling for the Champions League right now. This season, no matter what you say about the scariness of Manchester City, this Arsenal team could win the league. They don't have to beat every single side around them in the top 6 this season. It doesn't feel like that. It feels slightly different. They have to just keep winning against teams that they're supposed to win against. And right now, it doesn't look like this Arsenal team is going to fall off the tracks. And as long as they can stay on track, they've got every chance. And of course, City are a different beast. Haaland is very scary, but there's that togetherness and belief at Arsenal on the pitch, in the stands, and it's all coming from the manager. And it's an exciting time to be an Arsenal fan. It's unbelievable. Probably. I mean, I'm not an Arsenal fan, but Liverpool went through this and I enjoyed it. Speaking of which, what is happening at Liverpool? So what is it? The lack of Sadio Mane, the injuries, Darwin Núñez not hitting the ground running, Jurgen Klopp's past it, Trent Alexander-Arnold can't defend. Which should we go for this week? I dare say it's a combination, not of all of them. I don't think Jurgen Klopp's past it. But there are some major issues at Liverpool, and it's becoming more worrying as the weeks go on, because there's this constant feeling, and it had it against Manchester City, where it's like, oh, okay, if we could just perform like this all the time, then we're okay. And I joked on Twitter, I was like, can we play City every week? Because there is something in the Liverpool psyche that says, we need to beat this lot. We need to make this lot, like, remember us, basically. It happened in the Community Shield. It happened in the league. And those are two performances where City looked average and Liverpool looked brilliant in both games. But they can't beat Nottingham Forest. And they didn't ever look like beating Nottingham Forest. Yeah, there were some set-piece opportunities that they should have maybe taken. Van Dijk could have had a hat-trick on another day. But ultimately, Forest looks pretty comfortable. And I think there's a big issue with Liverpool that the players they've brought in aren't necessarily scary enough right now. Núñez doesn't have that fear factor. Like, if he'd banged 10 goals this year, I'm sure defences would be more worried about him. But the missing Sadio Mane, for me, is a big factor here. A big factor at play, in that when he played with Salah and Firmino or Jota, whoever else, teams knew they had to be at their absolute best to stop that from being a constant and vigorous threat, basically. And that's kind of disappeared. Even with Luis Diaz, I've talked about it before, it's just not quite the same. And I think teams now feel like they've got a bit of a chance and a game plan of attacking the space left by Trent Alexander-Arnold. Obviously, he's not playing in recent games, and that's a big decision Klopp's made, but it hasn't necessarily solved things. It almost, like, getting rid of world-class players makes you not quite as good. Him and Jordan Henderson, I mean, there's talks they're not getting on as well as they have done in the past, and who knows? I mean, you look at the team that started against Forest, maybe there's a little bit of truth to that, but also Liverpool played 3 games in 6 days, and there's probably something to that as well. And Klopp's got to be super careful. But we're going to go into this World Cup break with Liverpool not contending, not looking like a team capable of winning the league, never mind doing it logistically. And so there's still massive question marks. I don't think Jurgen Klopp would ever leave. It seems illogical to me. And I don't think Trent Alexander-Arnold would ever go into midfield. But if they don't fix it soon, what happens? How bad can this get for Liverpool? It's all well and good beating Manchester City, but what does it mean if you can't beat Forest? Very little. Speaking of Forest, that's probably where Cristiano Ronaldo is right now. Where could he be? Absolutely. I mean, what is he doing? Manchester United are on the up. Ten Hag has got the fans and the players on board, and they're believing in a similar project, I think. And again, there's that belief at United that it's going to be rough. There's going to be weeks where it doesn't work out, but ultimately, we're now all looking in the same direction. Whereas there's a man at the top of Manchester United in many regards, Cristiano Ronaldo, that is looking the other way. And it's a problem. And we talked about it in the summer that he's a man that should have left and should leave and now should definitely go. And if it's pre-World Cup or during or post, regardless, he doesn't need to be at the football club. Manchester United do not need Cristiano Ronaldo, in my opinion, at this point. You free up the wages, you let him go, and you bring someone in to replace him in the January that makes more sense for everybody, frankly. And I'm sure Ten Hag is eyeing up those people. If you're a United fan, it must be difficult. He's an icon and a legend of your team, and he's a global superstar. And there's obviously perks that come with having him at the football club, but those right now are not outweighed by the negatives that he brings, whether it be on the bench, on the pitch, or on Instagram. It's time for him to move on. It's not Ronaldo's time anymore, and as much as that's difficult for him to stomach, and for as good as he's been in the past, it's not what we're dealing with anymore, and it's time to go. And he's a distraction, and that's the bit that I think for United fans, you just don't want that at this point. You want the players there to just thrive and enjoy their football and not have to worry about, again, a global superstar who's throwing his toys out the pram. And let's end with what I think, other than maybe the ownership, is a feel-good story with the Premier League, and that's Eddie Howe's job at Newcastle and how well he's done. I'm inclined to give managers the credit in these situations because Steve Bruce was given a lot of criticism at Newcastle and seemingly couldn't get anything out of a Newcastle side that seemed to be underperforming, but was sort of at a level. Eddie Howe is proving that just with a couple of signings, and admittedly, Bruno Guimaraes is phenomenal, and we've talked about him in many a look back at just how influential and just how good he is, and that's not changing. But Eddie Howe, again, we mentioned a few of these teams, right, that are getting people on side. Arsenal a good example, but so are Newcastle. Like, Eddie Howe has the support of St James's Park behind him every single game, and the players are thriving off that. They're loving that, and it's quite clear that even though it's a similar set of players that existed just a few years ago or even months ago, that the change in attitude you can get if the coaching and the attitude to each game is different, and you're given a style of play that suits the individuals on the pitch, that collectively they come together and play a level of football that I'm not sure many Newcastle fans thought would be expected, especially with the lack of signings. I think a lot of people thought Newcastle would do a lot more, but there's something to be said for team cohesion and having a team that suit one another and play for each other's strengths and weaknesses and cover each other when they need to. And at the same time, they actually look like they're having fun. And that's not something you would have ever said about Newcastle a year ago from now. The ownership changed, of course, and there's many question marks over that still, I think, for lots of people. But ultimately, what Eddie Howe's doing on a footballing side of things is phenomenal. And Newcastle can take a lot of heart from the fact that they're not... Like, the talk was right, and I said it probably, Eddie Howe is the manager before the next guy. Right now, Eddie Howe looks like the guy. Elsewhere, Graham Potter's start at Chelsea has been rocky, I think we would say. There's definitely more to come there, and it's definitely going to take a little bit of a bedding in period. They've got big injuries, and Reece James missing is not only harmful to them, but to England. They're kind of lucky in a sense that a lot of his injury will be taken up by the World Cup. Not good news for England, obviously, but for Chelsea, he's a massive part of what that team do, and I'm sure Graham Potter really enjoys having him in the squad. Yeah, Chelsea just look like a team that are going to finish 4th or 5th. And there's not much more to say. They're going to finish 4th or 5th. Leicester don't seem that bad anymore. Leicester are doing goals and winning. Even Jamie Vardy got a goal and an assist. And for me, Leicester could be the story there. But if Jamie Vardy's getting a goal and an assist, Wolverhampton Wanderers are being relegated, I would be worried. And I think fans of Wolves are. I think you could probably put your arm around a Leeds fan and agree with a lot of the things each of you are saying. There's two teams there that I think expect far more for considering what they're getting. And there were some big additions made by both clubs and some players brought in that I think they both thought would elevate them. And it seems to be that it's disrupted the balance a little bit. Whether it's Jesse Marsh at Leeds or, of course, the managerial, I was going to call it a merry-go-round, but the managerial changes at Wolves, there are some issues there that are bigger and perhaps underlying to the issues that you see out on the pitch at the moment. They're just not getting wins. And I know it sounds super simple and super basic to be like, they're just not winning football matches, but the performances, they're not horrendous. Like, sometimes they are, but ordinarily, like, against the teams they're competitive against, they're not horrendous, but they're just not winning. And Premier League notoriously is about winning. So a fix has to be found. For Wolves, it still feels like a goal scorer. And for Leeds, just a lack of quality in a few areas, maybe including the bench. It's a problem. So let's do some winners and losers from the last 3 weeks then. You can pick the order, and I'll pick the people. Eddie Howe, Mikel Arteta, and how can I not put Erling Haaland in there again? Losers, Steven Gerrard won't be on the list again, so he goes into the bottom spot, or the top. He's the biggest loser, let's put it that way. And then who else can we pick out? I think you've got to say Liverpool are in there as well. They've had such a terrible time. Cristiano Ronaldo, it's the end of his era in the Premier League, I feel like. And this isn't how he wanted it to end. So yeah, leave me yours in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this little look back roundup, this might be how a look back looks from now on. So leave your comments in the comment section and tell me if you prefer this format to covering every single game gone by in the last 3 weeks. Yeah, I'm open to both. But this was fun. This was nice to be able to just give an overall look at everything. So with love, with care, from DoctorBenjy. Until next time, I'll see you again soon for some more. Next Monday we'll be back, and yeah, lots of Football Manager to come, including that England series. You'll enjoy it.